Good afternoon, everyone.
I'm Teresa Kiambao,
And I'm Gypsy Machacon.
and we'll be reporting about land reform and rural development.
Today, we'll be comparing two countries, which are the Philippines and, of course, Mexico. So, what is the problem? According to the Asian Development Bank, or ADB, poverty and inequality in the Philippines remains a challenge. Economic growth does not necessarily translate to poverty reduction because poverty reduction has been much slower. One of the said major causes of poverty in the Philippines is our failure to properly manage our agricultural sectors. Almost all of the presidential administrations practice the idea of Metro Manila being the center of attention, leaving rural areas, especially the agri-fishery sectors, being less developed. Local governments have not systematically established land information system, such as boundaries, locations, land values, and land ownership. How is identifying the problem significant? First of all, one of the largest exporters of coconut oil and sugar is the Philippines. Our country is also known for some of its major agricultural products, which are sugar, rice, coconut, and corn. It is still primarily an agricultural country, despite of it being industrialized. Most of the people who live below the poverty line live in the rural areas, wherein agriculture is their main source of living. Without having to resolve poverty, our economic growth will still be affected. So how was the problem identified? And was it effective? During the Spanish era, the encomienda system was widely implemented in the Philippines. This system was used in order to increase their cash crops. Filipinos, being the source of labor, became aware of what the country has to offer. Instead of us, Filipinos, benefiting from our own resources, it is the colonizers that were able to grow their economy. The agrarian system that was established raised the Filipinos' awareness. The Spaniards left us with ideas and concepts which are now widely used in the country, such as the concept of land ownership through what they call as título de la tierra, or the land titles.
On the other hand, some of the problems that Mexico has is that nearly 3/4 of the population lives below the national poverty level. Another would be 1/5 of the economically active population doesn't have cash income. Malnourishment is also very rampant among children in Mexico. 30% of those children do not even go to school. Aside from these, there's an unequal agrarian system. The agricultural sector also represents less than 8% of the gross national income. So why are these problems important? First of all, Chiapas exports more coffee than any other state. Mexico is also considered one of the top 3 exporters for corn, bananas, tobacco, and cacao. Because of these problems, it is causing an uprising in land inequality and injustice. National trade policies are also not beneficial for the ones producing the goods. How are these problems identified? First of all, just like the Philippines, Mexico was also conquered by the Spanish. Because of this, there were gross injustices and inefficiencies in the agrarian system set up by them. Studies also showed that the latifundia, minifundia system is not as efficient as the family-sized farms. Latifundia is a large landed estate or ranch, while minifundia is a small land holding. Because of this, it was very effective in helping raise awareness in Mexico's inefficient agricultural sector.
So now, let me enumerate the steps taken to address the problem. One of the most famous land reforms in the Philippines was led by President Marcos.
it is under his Presidential Decree number 27, which was his second release decree. His land reform was considered as the most successful attempt of land reform ever. There were 7 hectares of rice and cornfields that were transferred to each of the tenants who tilled them. One strength that the land reform got was that it broke down many of the largest haciendas in some of the challenges that were experienced during the implementation of the land reform were compensation for the landowners was limited to 2.5 times the annual profit. Lack of funds was also experienced and also conflicts between landowners. The land reform of Marcos resulted to land redistribution moving at a fast pace. But sadly, it failed because it only covered 10% of the overall farmland of the Philippines. And also, challenges were not met due to Marcos being impeached during the People Power Revolution. Moving on, we have President Corazon Aquino's Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program, or CARP. This is known as the redistribution of agricultural lands to the landless farmers and farm workers, regardless of the tenurial agreement. A sub-program under this is called Land Tenure Improvement. It seeks to provide lands to the landless farmers and promote agrarian justice. As this was converted to a law, it was called Republic Act Number 6657, or better known as the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Law. Leading agencies for the implementation were Department of Agrarian Reform, or DAR, and Department of Environment and Natural Resources, or DENR. A strength by CARP was that it covered approximately 7.8 million hectares of land. Some of the challenges experienced during the implementation of the program were some titles were destroyed, which is to undergo a court trial before the reissuance. Some had errors in their titles, which should be corrected. There were also conflicts between the beneficiaries on who should be qualified or not. As the implementation experienced lack of funds, Department of Agrarian Reform decided to cut the distribution from 400,000 hectares to 250,000 hectares. Another thing that was experienced during the implementation of the program was the very famous 15,000 hectare Hacienda Luisa issue. To address this problem, President Corazon Aquino made it clear that the Hacienda Luisa will also be distributed. The program resulted to shortage of rice, farmers leaving the farms, businessmen staying away from the agricultural sectors, and it only accomplished to distribute 22.5% of the lands. Last but not the least is the Philippine Rural Development Program, or the PRDP, by our current President, Noynoy Aquino. This program was effective last December 3, 2014. This is a 6-year program which aims to increase the productivity of the agri-fishery sectors of the country and enhance the economic potential of the rural producers. This is a 27 billion project that covered 80 provinces and 16 regions. The strengths of the PRDP are that opportunities are expanding. Road construction not only helps with the agri-fishery sector, but also to the children who are having a hard time in going to school. Lastly, it is supported by the World Bank. Some of the challenges experienced during the implementation of the program were planning the execution of the program. There was no assurance in the proper implementation of the sub-projects. That's why the Department of Agrarian Reform assigned farmers and accredited organizations to supervise. Another thing is that they don't know how to make the LGUs to fully commit to the processes of the program. Lastly is that some areas have rugged roads or only limited number of transportations reach them. That is why there were implemented sub-projects of road construction. As for now, the project is ongoing, that's why there are no concrete results yet. But for now, the construction of the roads are still ongoing.
Some of the steps taken to address the problem was first, land redistribution became a top priority for Mexico. So, one of the laws that they created in order to do that was the Ejido system. The Ejido system is a process whereby the government promotes the use of communal land shared by the people of the community. This started in 1917 Mexican Constitution. This was also amended in 1991 by the Mexican President Carlos Salinas de Gortari. Now, let's move on to the strengths of the Ejido system. First, land distribution became more equal than most countries in Latin America. It also allowed private land holdings to be improved without having the fear of redistribution. Aside from these, you could also look at the new provisions stated in the 1971 amendment that they did in the Ejido system. These would include the different rights and implementations that they did in order to improve the current system of the Ejido system. Although the Ejido system has its strengths, it also has its challenges. First of all, it was inefficiently designed during the very first version of the Ejido system. Second, there were poor incentives for farmers. Third, there was a lack of training, credit facilities, and infrastructure such as stables, silos, livestock, and hatcheries. A lot of them also didn't have tractors or any other agricultural equipment that would help them in producing crops faster. Lastly, the peasants also feared of losing their title or the right to use their land. Because these problems were very much present, the government did something in order for them to be able to resolve these problems. Part of which was the amendment in the Ejido system in 1971. They also changed the provisions in order for farmers to get better incentives, such as them being able to sell, rent, share crop, or mortgage their lands for collateral. They were also no longer required to work their land personally, so they could hire other people to be able to lessen the workload for them. They may also enter joint ventures with outside investors, provided that they follow the provisions set by the amendment. Finally, land ownership limits were also improved, maintained, and clarified in order for them to be able to gain better incentives, better benefits, and in order for them to be able to do something that would help them improve their lives. They were also assigned an agrarian attorney general in order for them to be able to get the maximum benefit that they are entitled. For the results of the Ejido system in the 1917 Mexican Constitution, it included that more than half of Mexico's total land and roughly 2/3 of cropland have been redistributed. It came from large estates to small farmers, and 54% of the land during the amendment in 1991, it opened the way for profound transformation. It also opened up land reform or Ejido sector to private sector. And lastly, it ended land redistribution during the 1991 amendment. During the amendment in 1991, some of the key provisions of the new law included the constitutional obligation to redistribute land is removed. Land ownership limits have been maintained and clarified, and improved lands will not be reclassified for expropriation. An agrarian attorney general or a PA will be a presidentially appointed, and land disputes will be settled by autonomous agrarian tribunals. Ejidatarios may sell, rent, share crop, or mortgage their lands as collateral for loans. They will no longer be required to work for their land personally. Ejidatarios may also enter into joint ventures with outside investors, may form associations among themselves, and may sign long-term production contracts with outsiders. Lastly, legal restrictions on foreign investment are lifted. but a foreign equity capital limit of 49% remained. Aside from the EJIDO system, the government also created different programs that would help alleviate the current condition of Mexico. One of which is the NAFTA, or what you call the North American Free Trade Agreement. It is a free trade agreement between the United States, Canada, and Mexico. It is a comprehensive agreement that sets the rules for international trade and investment between Canada and the United States. This agreement would help improve in the quality production, leading to the increase in exports to the United States, Canada, and of course Mexico. It is important to note the different strengths that NAFTA brought. Merchandise trade among NAFTA partners have more than tripled, reaching $946.1 billion in 2008. NAFTA partners exchanged about $2.6 billion in merchandise on a daily basis. Over 30 out of the 50 states, Canada or Mexico ranked as the first or second largest export market. Many Americans, small business exporters, first foreign customers are in Canada or Mexico and under NAFTA. U.S. trade with Canada and Mexico have supported over 140,000 small and medium-sized businesses. This would mean that more jobs are created in order for us to be able to bring the demand or give the demand that these people are asking for. This will then help Mexico to be able to provide more jobs and in order for them to be able to decrease the unemployment rate that they are currently experiencing. Although the NAFTA has its strengths, it also has its weaknesses. An example would be that 2/3 of all ejidatarios grow heavily subsidized corn. Another was that Mexico underwent a sharp recession in mid-1990s. In order for them to be able to fix those problems, they wanted to reduce the number of people in that certain sector. They also transferred the crops that are going to be more suitable for Mexico so that there would be no waste in production. As for the recession, they had to bounce back and of course create more job opportunities in order for the GDP for them to be able to get back on their feet. It was also said that even though the NAFTA has its weaknesses, without it, Mexico would be even worse off. After the NAFTA was signed, it became one of the world's largest free trade zones. It also laid the foundation for strong economic growth and rising prosperity for all three countries. In Mexico and in Canada, their trade agreements or their trade have increased, almost tripled ever since it started. Employment across North America has also increased to almost 40 million jobs since the start of the NAFTA. NAFTA also wanted to make sure that crops are more suitable to Mexico's terrain and market position in order for the farmers to be able to gain the proper compensation for the products that they do provide. Looking at both the Philippines and Mexico, we are able to see that some of their problems are similar, especially with regards to their agricultural sector. Going back to the projects that the government of Mexico created, we can say that it is innovation in rural development because of the various ways that they are trying to fix the country's current problem, especially with regards to the agricultural sector and land distribution. They have also continued moving forward through the continuous amendment and improvements that they are doing in order to stop the problem.
Assessing the said programs implemented in the Philippines, 2 of them failed and 1 is still ongoing. It can actually be concluded that what is happening in our country is land reform in reverse. President Cory Scarp actually caused more problems instead of achieving its goals for the country.